In the last episode, we looked at how we can actually get hold of a command block and then just some of the basic commands. But now that we actually have the command block, what do we actually do with it, and how do we continuously use that command without us having to keep on pressing a button? Now, this is where clocks come in. Now, I'm going to be showing you the 4 clocks that I use in any of my maps. So in any of my maps, you will see at least a full clock like that, and you will see a enhanced hopper clock like that. I've brought these 2 clocks in as well because from time to time, I might actually use them for something. I mean, it completely depends on the actual circumstance itself. So these 2 are survival-friendly clocks. Okay, so first of what we have over here is a comparator. Okay, now the cool thing about let me just turn it off. The cool thing about a comparator is that it can actually detect the strength of a output from a command block or a hopper clock or any kind of other container, and then output the signal strength based on the contents. For example, if I do put a, let me just quickly put a, let's put a dispenser in here. So if I put one item in a dispenser, you will see that it outputs one signal. If I put something that does not stack, okay, now I'm not going to go into too much detail in this, but I just want to give you the idea of the strength. So if I put something else in here that that can't stack, you will see that the signal strength actually increases. Okay, so if I put in another let's put in another piece. So if I put in another piece, you'll see that it extends. Okay, so it's important then to just note that a comparator outputs a signal strength based on what is powering it. Okay, so however, what a lot of people don't actually realize is that a comparator has a secondary function, okay, where it will actually subtract a side input and then output the strongest signal. So if I have 2 signals coming in, so one from behind and one from the side, it'll output the strongest signal. Okay, now if I right click on it, I turn it on the subtract function. So what's going to happen is I'm going to output a signal that is the strength of the signal and the strength of the signal subtracted, and then it outputs the signal. Okay, now why this is useful in a clock is that when we have a single power source on the one side, the full strength will go out, okay, because that is the strongest signal. It'll then go back in, okay, which will then subtract that strong signal from that signal, which will give us a 0 signal, okay, which will then not output. But then we still have that signal which then outputs, so it just creates a continuous loop of flashing. Okay, now this clock, you'll see, is pretty much comparable to the speed of my enhanced hopper clock. Okay, but as you can see, this is a relatively cheap and easy clock to make in survival. Now this is a survival clock. Right, now the second survival clock is a hopper clock. Okay, so we've got 2 hoppers. Now, you'll see that the hoppers are actually pointing towards each other. So let me just quickly show you guys how to do that. If I put a hopper down, like so, and I then hold down Shift, so I'm crouching, and I click on it with a next hopper, you'll see that this hopper now points into that hopper. So if I break that hopper and I point it at this one, you'll see that the hoppers are now pointing towards each other. So if I now put an item in the hopper, okay, it is going to be transferring this item to this hopper over here, and because I've got a comparator over here, it's going to give me an output based on the contents of this hopper. So I've only got one item in it, so it's going to output a signal every time the item comes in. Okay, so the item gets transferred to this hopper, there's a slight cooldown period, and then it gets transferred to that one, there's a slight cooldown period, gets transferred back to this one, etc, 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 etc. Okay, now I am not in any way guru when it comes to ticks and game ticks and the deeper mechanics of this, but this is roughly about 10 to 15 tick cooldown ticks per transfer. So you're looking at roughly about a little bit more than a second per oscillation or per tick. Okay, so this is a very good clock for survival as well, and it's very reliable. Okay, you can actually use this in unloaded chunks that when you come back into the chunk, it'll just carry on ticking away. Okay, right. Next we have the enhanced hopper clock. Now this is based on the survival hopper clock, except I'm going to manipulate the speed at which the item is actually transferred. Okay, so hoppers are considered a data carrying block because it has some extra data associated with it. For example, in which direction is the nozzle pointing, what item is in it, how long is it going to be until it transfers, etc., etc. Now, because of that, we can then manipulate the block data for that block. Now, this is an intermediate command, but which I'll probably do another series on intermediate commands, but you do need to just know this one command to make this work, and it's very, very simple. I'm going to change the block data of that block, which is this block over here, and I'm going to change the transfer cooldown of that block to 0 ticks. So the moment the item goes in, it immediately gets pushed back, and I've got exactly the same in the reverse. It pushes it backwards and forwards very, 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 very quickly. Now, the reason I've got the setup like this is I just like to get this command block kind of out of the way. Normally, I put it underneath, but this just visually feels a bit better. So when it activates this command, so this is the command you would want to run, or the reason you would want to run this clock is this command. It activates this redstone dust, which activates this block, which sets this block data. Okay, now the nice thing about this is you can actually speed it up as I've done, or you can slow it down. So if I go, let's make this a 1 second clock. So if I do 20 ticks, you'll see this will now tick every once a second. It'll tick. Okay. If I do, let's make 100. We now set it to so make it 100. We now have a 5 second clock, so it'll tick every 5 seconds. Okay, then there we go. And you can do this any amount of transfers. I mean, you can I've used this clock to do like a 1,000,000 tick clock, so it'll tick once every 1,000,000 seconds, which is kind of not really needed. But anyway, so yeah, there we go. I'm just going to set that back to 0. So once this ticks away, it'll pick that up, and then just there we go. Proceed again. The outputs are over here. Now, I'm not going to explain to you the commands in here because we'll look at it when we get to that one over there, but your outputs is over there, over here, like so. Oops, there, and on the sides. And last but by no means the least, we come to the full clock. Now, this clock is the clock I use in pretty much all of my actual maps. So if you've seen any video of mine where I used a concept recently, you would have noticed these lines of redstone blocks that powers my actual commands, and this is the clock that I use. Okay, now I'm going to give you a basic overview of this clock. In the description below, I'm actually going to link you to a video done by a chap called TRON, which goes into this into depth. He also goes into the execution order, because that's another important thing about this clock, is that it actually executes in a particular direction, which is fantastic. Okay, so it executes this way, it fills it up from this side, up, so you can actually run commands sequentially very, very easily. Okay, so the reason this is called the fill clock is because it actually uses the fill command. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm filling up an area from this block to that block. Okay, and I'm going to, this command over here, I'm going to fill that area with stone. But I'm actually using a special feature of the fill command. I'm going to be replacing redstone. So I'm going to fill it with stone only if there is redstone blocks in that area. Okay, if there's no redstone blocks in that area, it won't actually fill it up, and you will be left with these blank holes. Okay, so that's the one at the bottom, and then the one on the side. Now, I like putting mine on the side so I can leave the top open. Now, what this fill clock does, it does exactly the same, but it does the inverse. It is now going to be filling up that area with a redstone block, but only if that area contains stone. Okay, so that is, if I put a stone back, you'll see that I have my clock running again. So this is very, very, very useful for when making maps and you want to troubleshoot something, like you've got like a bunch of commands and you want to just turn that one off. That's it. It's turned off. If I want to turn it back on again, I just pop down a block and it's turned back on again. Okay, now these commands are running at 20 times a second. So this is running at 20 times a second. Now I'm getting a lot of people going, but how does this work? I mean, you see the redstone block, but why is this redstone powering the command block continuously, shouldn't it be turning it off? Well, no, because this runs so fast that you can't actually see it ticking away. What I have done, now remember these two command blocks I didn't show you before, it's exactly the same as those commands. Okay, so it's exactly the same full commands, but it is now slowed down, so you can actually see what happens in a more of a human viewable version. So this is exactly what the full clock does at the bottom, except slowed down. So you'll see it changes from stone to redstone, stone, redstone, stone, redstone. So it'll turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. So if I say 1, okay, you can see the speed at the bottom. If I say, okay, let's just put it on the side actually. If I say 2, you'll see the difference. Okay. Right. Now you'll see I'm replacing this with stone, but it can be any other block as long as it's not air. I mean, there is discussions whether this is true or not, but in theory, it makes sense. The way a lot of lag actually comes from lighting updates. So that's the nice little shadows you see when something is being lit. Now, what happens is if I fill this with air, I'm actually in effect removing that block from the world. Okay, so Minecraft then goes, ooh, okay, there's no air, so I need to recalculate the lighting of all the other blocks around it. Okay, when I put the block back, Minecraft goes, oh, there's a block. I need to then recalculate the lighting for all the blocks around it again. So in theory, by replacing it with another block, you're never actually telling Minecraft to redo the actual lighting updates. Now, another thing to note, you'll see that over here I've got 48 chunk updates. Okay, now this is not because of the full clock. This is another awesome thing about the full clock. It's because of all these other clocks that's running over here. So if I turn these clocks off, why is this not working now? Oh, right, okay. If I turn this off, okay, it seems I can no longer, there we go. So if I turn this off, you will see my chunk updates has now dropped to 0. Okay, completely and utterly stopped. And this clock is still running. So if I go, say 1, you'll see, even though this command is running, you'll see I still have 0 chunk updates. So this is truly a phenomenal, awesome clock. Now, none of these clocks are my own invention. Well, this one I've had didn't quite invent the exact mechanic, but I perfected it and made it work a lot better. Now, it's not my invention, so please do go do some browsing. Most of who actually invented these things are lost somewhere along the line, and I would love to give them credit. I just don't know who they are. Okay, so guys, next episode I'm going to be looking at scoreboard, and I'm going to be looking at some of the basic commands in the scoreboard. We won't be doing too many advanced things, but I'm just going to do the basics. Cool, so yeah, thank you very much, and please join me for the next episode.